Okay, so welcome to this class. Once again, this is financial accounting, and we had here to do some kind of revision. And today we want to look at one of the topics called correction of errors. Correction of errors. Now, I was trying to bring in the reasons why we actually have correction of errors. Of course, accountants that prepare financial accounts are also humans, just like you and me. And the work that we input is subject to errors as well, okay? So if you remember the accounting process, where we say that we start from, let's say, the transaction, and this from the transaction, this usually moves to say, of course, from the source documents. And then from the source documents, then we move to our books of original entry. And then from books of original entry, us getting to our ledgers, and then from our ledgers getting to the trial balance. Okay, so ideally errors happen in all these steps, okay, especially from the source documents, the books of original entry, and the ledgers. And what exactly happens here is that remember, on the source documents you have things like the invoice, you have things like the receipt. Okay, now when you're writing an invoice, you might write, instead of writing 2,000, you might write 20,000. Okay, or instead of writing 22,000, you might write 20200. The same thing with the receipt. So you can make an error at this stage. Okay, so that is one of the things that could cause errors. Now, from the books of original entry, these are your prime, basically, these are prime books, basically books where you enter transactions for the very first time. Things like the purchases, their book, things like, okay, purchases, their book, you can have the sales, their book. Even the cash book itself is a book of original entry. So you can also make basically an error in each of these documents, okay? Now, of course, if you make an error here and then or here, it will definitely also affect your ledgers, okay? Ledgers is where we now have the accounts, like the purchases account, like the sales account, and then let's say maybe cash account, whatever it is. And you know that for us to have the trial balance is basically a list of accounts. So there are cases where you get to the trial balance and your trial balance is not balancing, okay? Your trial balance is not balancing. Now, in that case, it shows that you've made some errors along the way. But there are also some cases where your trial balance can actually balance, okay? Let me just try to create this in another column. Your trial balance can actually balance when you actually have some errors that you've committed along the way, okay? So it doesn't mean that errors would only happen when you have not, let's say, okay, your trial balance may not balance only when you have, let's say, maybe errors, okay? But errors can also happen when your trial balance is balancing, okay? That is what I want to bring to your attention, okay? Now, in understanding when our trial balance is balancing, but there are when a trial balance is, let's say, balancing, and there are, let's say, there are errors, we call those errors, we say that those errors don't affect the trial balance. Those errors don't affect the trial balance. And of course, when our trial balance does not balance, then we say that those errors do affect the trial balance. Now, one of the things that we do is there's an account called a suspense account. There's what we call a suspense account. And how the suspense account works is that it tries to help us balance our trial balance. Okay, this is a suspense account. Now, suspense accounts are only introduced when our trial balance is not balancing. Okay, just like the way today you have, let's say, you could have these as your accounts in your trial balance. And yes, we can call this your trial balance. And let's say this account has 20K. Then sales, of course, sales have a normal credit balance. This can be like 40K. And maybe this can be like 10K. Okay. Now, maybe this could be your summarized trial balance. Now, ideally, you expect that this trial balance would definitely be able to add up on each side. But here you have 30, and then right here you have 40. Now, trial balance from its name, definitely it cannot just remain like that. So this trial balance, we introduce what is called a suspense account. And this suspense account comes in on the side that is less. So for example, here we have 30. This is our debit side, okay? From the trial balance, you know that trial balance has a debit column, and then it also has a credit column, okay? So this is your debit side and this is your credit side. So ideally, the debit side is less than your credit side. So you'd introduce a suspense account. So which is like, let's say, 10,000. So when you introduce 10,000, this total will now change to become 40,000. So ideally, your trial balance will definitely balance, okay? But you see, this suspense account, from the definition of this suspense account, it's basically a temporary account, okay? Just from the word suspense. It's a temporary account that should not be left within your books. Okay, actually, if auditors are auditing your books and they come across a suspense account, that shows something about you as an accountant. Okay, mainly it shows that you don't understand your work. Okay, so this is one way a suspense account can be introduced within our books. Okay, so just also to comment on this suspense account. Suspense accounts, other than coming in at this level, can also be brought within our books when we don't know the alternative account, when we are not aware of the alternative account to post to. Okay, what I mean by this is that there are also cases, even before you come to the trial balance, there are cases where a transaction might happen and you can't tell what is the double entry for that transaction. Now, of course, if you have you've done some good study, yes, you may be able to figure this out, but there are many people who really struggle along the way. Okay, and I'll give you an example just in case. Maybe today you're here and the next morning you get to work and they tell you that one of the store got fire. Okay, so the question will ask you, what is the double entry you have to pass to recognize the store that got kind of burnt down? So for you, you'll be saying we lost stock. Yes, you lost stock, and you may think of crediting stock, but what are you going to debit? Okay, are you going to debit an expense? Are you going to debit an insurance receivable? What are you exactly going to do? So of course, it definitely will be either an expense or maybe insurance receivable along the way, but that does not come easy to everyone. Okay, not everyone will think in that line. Most people will be able to get the other leg of crediting inventory, but may not know the alternative one. Okay, so in that case, you can also use a suspense. Okay, so suspense account has those two uses. It is used when you don't know the alternative account to post to, and it's also used when we are trying to create a balance within our trial balance. It's included in the side that is of less value, so that our trial balance can balance. Okay, now understanding that and having that kind of background of how a suspense account comes in, we need to also appreciate these key errors that I was trying to bring up. Okay, the errors that affect the trial balance, and then your errors that don't affect the trial balance. Now, definitely, the errors that affect your trial balance, that make your trial balance not balance, are all corrected by a suspense. Okay, each error that affects your trial balance is corrected by a suspense account. So that is something that you need to be able to know. Okay, and errors that don't affect the trial balance, these ones are corrected by doing the right thing. Okay, you basically reverse out what you did as wrong, and then you do the right thing. That is basically what we do. Okay, and no suspense account is involved for such kind of errors. Now, I just want to give you some example here. Now, errors that affect the trial balance. Okay, errors that affect the trial balance, definitely we have error of single entry. We have error of single entry. I hope you've heard about that error of single entry. Now, error of single entry is more of just like the way I've given you an example of, let's say we have a scenario where maybe one of our stores gets burnt, and you as an accountant, you basically don't know where to post the alternative transaction. So what that would mean is that you end up posting, let's say, one transaction. Okay, so in that case, you now need to do what? You need to basically, if you do that transaction, your books will have a single entry in them, and your trial balance in most cases will definitely not balance. So in that case, then you have to correct that using what? Using a suspense account. Okay, so that's very important. I just want to show you something small here so that we can use this as a guiding note for us. All right. So I hope that is something that is, let me just try to show you here. So you have these notes, and I just wanted to just bring to your attention. These are some of the notes that are around correction of errors. Okay, so you can be able to, I shared this text with you. Okay, no, maybe this case, but I shared this to just look out for errors. I think there's a suspense account here. Yes, control accounts help us on correction of errors, but I want to get another aspect. Maybe let me search for suspense. Okay, the suspense account is here. So we have the suspense account highlighted in this guide. This is a page 266. Okay, so it shows you the different kind of errors we have, and then it tries to also explain each of the error. Okay, yeah, but I will not dwell so much here. I just wanted to so that I don't forget to bring it to your attention. So single entry, single L of single entry, I've tried to explain that. One of the other error that you may also come across is the arithmetic error. The arithmetic errors, let's say, now, one of the things that you need to understand, when I say single entry error, yours is to also understand at what level was the single entry error done, okay? So the single entry error would have been done at the ledger step, at the step of the ledger, okay? Still with the arithmetic, now arithmetic errors can be made at this level. You can add up an invoice wrongly, because if you're adding up the total to put a total on your invoice, you might add it wrongly. You might also maybe add up, let's say, your total here before you transfer to the ledgers. So you also make an arithmetic error here. And then also in the ledgers, you might also make an arithmetic error as you balance off before you take them to the trial balance. So in that case, that error will definitely affect your, it will definitely affect your trial balance, okay? And then also one of the other errors that you can think about also when it comes to here is what we call the error of transposition. Is what we call the error of transposition. And how the errors of transposition work, I'm going to give you two values here. So that could be a value about 20 million. So instead of doing this, you might find yourself having something like this. You might find yourself having a figure like this. So basically you've transposed some figures, okay? So any kind of error that is around here would most likely make our trial balance not to balance, okay? Yeah. And then, like I said, once such an error is made, it is corrected by suspense account. So every time you're reading a scenario and they talking about any of these errors, then you need to, because one of the things that you need to understand is that once the examiner, let's say, gives you a question, let's say this is the question that we shall be, let's say, looking at. For every statement that you read, you should be able to know which part of, let's say, the accounting cycle this error could have been made, but also understand, does this error affect the trial balance or does it not affect the trial balance? You get it? And then also understanding, is this error corrected? Because if it affects the trial balance, then it is corrected by suspense account. Okay, I guess an example here. The purchases for the period were undercast by 3 million. Now, this is an arithmetic error. Okay, this is an arithmetic error. And if you remember very well, we have said that arithmetic errors do what? Arithmetic errors affect our trial balance, okay? So it means that when you're correcting such an error, you definitely need a suspense account involved, okay? There will be a suspense account here, okay? So that is very important that you know. Now, when you look at errors that don't affect the trial balance, of course, we have error of principle. We have the error of principle. And what happens with error of principle? Error of principle is around basically an interchange of accounts where you do, instead of posting into, let's say, instead of posting an item in an asset account, okay, you end up posting it in an expense account. So that is what happens. Posting an item in an expense account, you end up posting it in an expense account. So that's an L of principle. And in the same way, it can be either way around. Okay, so the principle is wrong. Okay, the principle is wrong. For example, it may not only even be this. Okay, let me say, for example, we added on to a building. Okay, there was a building extension, and for you, because the building extension, you think there is no new building that has been put up, then you post this to let's say to your expense account. Because an example also could be repairs and maintenance. Instead of posting your repairs and maintenance to the repairs and maintenance account, you may end up posting this maybe to the asset account, to the motor vehicle account. Now there is an L of principle. Okay, so you need to understand that the examiner usually can't bring a question without including such an error, and this is one of them. So extension to the building that cost 65, that was recorded in the as repairs expense. And you know very well that if we are having an extension to the building, then that is a capital expenditure. Remember, we have two things. We have what you call a revenue expenditure and a capital expenditure. Every time we are, let's say, extending a building, then in that way, we actually have what? We actually have a capital expenditure. And so we should debit our buildings account. Okay, we shall debit our buildings account instead of debiting the repair expenses account, because in this case, this is not the only aspect when it comes to, let's say, building. If at all we are painting, if you just paint a building, then that you can post to the expense account. But if it includes increasing capacity of an asset, for example, an extension of a building, you know, when you extend a building, it means you have an extra room, or one of the rooms gets a little larger compared to what it was. Now, the principle is that for any expense, okay, for any outflow that increases the capacity of the asset, that should be capitalized. And so we should call it a capital expenditure. And when I say it should be capitalized, what I'm trying to say is should be posted into the asset account. Okay. Yes. And of course, if I say that maybe any other expense that does not bring about increase or improvement in the capacity of an asset, that expense should actually be expensed, because it's a revenue expenditure. It is why we call it a revenue expenditure, because it's a day-to-day expenditure that facilitates, let's say, our no day-to-day kind of operations. Okay, so you need to be able to distinguish between those two. So the examiner usually wants usually to bring something around that. So you need to make sure that you understand exactly what you should be able to do. And then apart from error of principle, we have what we call the error of commission. The error of commission. Okay. Now, what error of commission basically does is basically is usually to do with names. Okay, I usually simplify it in that way. For example, sales to Samuel, you post them into Sam's account, and maybe you have totally two different people. You have a client who is called Sam, and then you have another client who is called Samuel, and these are totally two different. But because you mingle them, or maybe one of your accountants cannot distinguish between which client you called Samuel and which other client you called Sam, in that case, you mix up things, okay? Or somebody can be Samson and somebody can be Samuel, or somebody can be Martha and another one can be Maria. When you mix up things in an account, for example, maybe a sale to Martha being posted to the account of Maria, in that alone, that will be definitely an error of principle or an error of commission, okay? Yeah, an error of commission would definitely bring us to that point. Now, other than, let's say, the error of commission, we also have what we call, similar to this, we have what we call the error of omission. Okay? We have what we call the error of omission. Now, our error of omission is similar to C-M. Our error of omission also comes in here is that you might omit a transaction from the start, okay? You may omit a transaction from the start. Remember, from our accounting cycle here, from transaction happening, recording it in the source documents and so on, you may totally miss out a transaction here. Now, the reason why this does not affect our trial balance, and why even if you commit such an error, your trial balance will balance, is because the debit and credit will not have any effect, okay? Remember, the trial balance really survives on what you have on the debit and what you have on the credit. And from our double entry concept, ideally, if you pass a transaction rightly, every transaction will have a debit and credit entry, okay? So it means even on your trial balance, a transaction will have, whenever you see something on the credit and the debit, one transaction has an effect on what is appearing on the debit and what is appearing on the credit, okay? So if a transaction is totally left out, it means that the portion of the debit has been left out, the portion of the credit has also been left out. And that is how everything looks like, okay? So that is what basically does happen. Now, with that in mind, what we need to basically now proceed now, because we now know some of the errors that don't affect the trial balance. And like I said, errors that don't affect the trial balance are corrected by doing the right thing, okay? For example, error of principle, when we are correcting this error of principle, we remove the item. Let's say it was posted under the expense account. We remove it from the expense account and post it to the right account, which let's say is the asset account. The same thing with error of commission. If they posted a transaction to the account of Samuel, we remove it from the account of Samuel and post it to the account of Sam, if Samuel and Sam are totally different clients. If it's error of omission, how we correct this is we actually record the transaction as it appears, okay? Even when you come to here and try to look here, I think let's just see if we can see an error of omission here. So we have something here where they are telling us that no entry had been made in the company's books of accounts for bank charges of 67,000 debited in the bank statement. Now, this alone, this error is actually an error of omission, okay? Because there is nothing that totally was done about that record, okay? So that would be one of the things that you may need to look into, okay? So now we try to get down onto, let's say, the question itself, as we can see. Now the question goes to say, I'll just try to read through, where they're telling us that the accounts assistant of Excel Limited prepared the financial statements despite the existence of a suspense account balance of 150,000. So they're telling us that the statement of financial position as at 30th June 2020 is provided below. So we have inventory, which is 78,540. We have plant and equipment. We have buildings. We have cash and bank. When we have land, then we have trade receivables and so on. Now, the examiner has a way of sometimes they may bring this in terms of, they may give you a statement of financial position, just like the way we have here, okay? But all the reason why they have given you this information is because they want you to pick the suspense account. Now, as you can see from our statement of financial position, our suspense account is recorded under assets, okay? What does this show you? This shows you that when you get back to your trial balance, okay? When you get back to your trial balance, remember we're trying to do something with the trial balance here. Maybe I might have removed it. Okay, maybe right here. So if this was your trial balance, let me just show you something small. Okay, so if this was your trial balance, as we can see it right here, if this is your trial balance, it would mean that if they are telling you from what they have given you as a statement of financial position, and they're telling you that the suspense account is actually under assets here, this would mean that from the trial balance perspective, the suspense account is actually on the debit side, okay? Because assets have a normal debit balance. So the suspense account is acting like an asset in its own, okay? Now that is very important because along the way, when you're actually trying to prepare your suspense account, you need to know where you put your balance brought down, because that is the first step that we do when we get into a suspense account. So that sometimes the examiner brings it in this way, where you have to figure it out, just like the way we have it here. Sometimes the examiner may bring it in terms of, let's say, a statement. Now, just like the way we have, this is another one. Here they are telling us that the accountants okay, so that is what I was trying to mean. Let me just try to reshare my screen. So my internet went down. So I was just trying to say that sometimes the examiner can actually bring you a question like this, where they'll give you a statement. Like for example, here where they're telling us that, but it failed to agree with debits being more than the credit by 22,410. Now, in this case, here they have helped to solve your problem, because here you know very well that if they are telling you that it failed to agree with debits being more than the credits with 22,410, then you know that your suspense account should be on the side that is lower. Okay, so here the debits were more than the credit, so your suspense account has a credit balance. Okay, so when you're drawing up your suspense account, the first thing that you do, your balance brought down would be on the credit side. Okay, that is what exactly would happen in that case. But like I said, sometimes the examiner would want to tweak it a little more. Okay, sometimes instead of, let's say now, like for example, that case, they have already brought us what they already brought us, let's say they already got the value from the trial balance. Sometimes what the examiner can do is that they can actually bring you a question with the trial balance, and then you have to figure it out. Okay, you basically have to find you have to get the suspense account yourself. Okay, I may not have a question here to show you, but you can be able to find it within, when you try to look through some of the past questions, you can be able to find such questions. Okay, so you need to be able to know how to handle all the circumstances that might come your way for such questions. Okay, yeah. So let's now dig into the question. What we exactly have. We are doing this question. So you also know that this question is for 15th March 2021. So let's see how this goes from a perspective of our solution. So I'll just use this tab. Now, every time you're correcting errors, like I said, the suspense account comes in handy here, but let's just see what this question was requiring us to do. This question was asking us to generalize, to correct the above errors. And then they're also telling us to prepare a suspense account, okay? To generalize and then to prepare a suspense account. Now, one of the things that I usually love is, I usually love doing this at a go, okay? I usually want to make sure that once I'm, let's say, calculating any of these questions, I basically do it at a go. So I'm going to have my journal, and then I also have my suspense account. So my suspense account will just try to use this. Okay. No border. So let's just try to draw up that. And then let's just have that. So let this be suspense account. So we'll give it a name according to the name we have here. This is what is the name of the company? This is Excel Limited. Okay. So this will be Excel Limited. So Excel Limited suspense account. And then let me just also start my journal here. Actually, this should even come first. So you make sure that you bring it first. This is a journal. Okay. And it is basically Excel Limited. So journals have a way of how to look like similar, like the way you would see a trial balance. Okay, you have, let's say, a debit, and then you have a credit. Okay, and then you have details. Sometimes we may also have, let's say, maybe a kind of sort of like a folio column. Okay, but let's just utilize this for now for learning purposes. Okay, so I'm going to have something like this, what I'm going to play with, as you're going to see. I usually love to do this along each other because it helps me save time. Okay, so like I said, what you basically, the reason why they have given you this balance sheet or statement of financial position is for you to know where is your balance for the suspense account. So since our suspense account has a balance of 4150 under assets, I'll just pick this value and come to my suspense account and put on the debit side. Okay, so I'm going to say balance brought down. Okay, we put it under that column. So that's my balance brought down, and that will remind me to put the degree of precision here, or UJX 1000. Okay, that is what I basically have. So that is the first step. Okay, that is the first step that you need to think about, especially in your suspense account. Now remember, they told you to journalize. Okay, to journalize. So in journalizing, we are now going to start. So they are telling us that the purchases for the period were undercast by 3 million. Okay, the purchases for the period were undercast by 3 million. Now, like I said, these purchases, when they say undercast, this is more of I don't know what to call it, but this is more from the perspective of your books of from the ledgers. Okay, this is like telling you that the ledger, the account, the ledger for purchases was actually added up wrongly by that 3 million. So how to correct this error? Now, the first thing that we shall ask ourselves, does this error affect our trial balance? If purchases were undercast, and it is only purchases that were undercast, definitely this error would affect our trial balance. Our trial balance will not balance by that value if at all we undercast our purchases. And in correcting this error, anything that affects the trial balance would require a suspense account. So ours just ask ourselves, what are we going to basically do? So if they were undercast by 3 million, it means that we have to add back the 3 million, okay? Because undercast means that we added by a lower amount. So it means that we have to add back by 3 million. We have to increase it by 3 million. And for purchases, when you increase in purchases, you debit them, okay? Because purchases have a normal debit balance. So the first thing that I'm going to think about here is I'm going to debit my purchases, okay? I'm going to debit my purchases. And why I'm going to debit my purchases by 3 million is because I want to increase them by 3 million, okay? So when I come to, let's say, right here within my details, okay? Maybe this is error number 1. I'll say I'm going to debit my purchases, okay? And okay, have this column. This column is a bit, let me just reduce it. So I'm going to debit this by 3 million, but I'll use 3,000, maybe just to, oh, it's okay. Let me use the whole 3 million since I have space. So I'll definitely debit by 3 million. Now, this is debit my purchases, okay? And then I'm going to credit. I'm going to credit suspense account. Suspense account. Now, why I'm now, let's say, crediting my suspense account, the reason why I'm doing this is because we have agreed that purchases, when they're undercast, they affect our trial balance and they are corrected by a suspense account, okay? So ideally, what this means that after I have debited my purchases to bring them to now a right amount, the credit I have to make is I have to make it in the suspense account, okay? Not any other account. Now, I want to explain this and I want you to be very, very attentive, okay? I want you to be very, very attentive. So purchases have a normal debit balance. Purchases have a normal debit balance. Now, if you undercast your purchases, okay? If you undercast your purchases by, let's say, 3 million, let me just even remove these details here. So I show you something. So if you undercast your purchases, it means that ideally the effect on your trial balance is that it will be 3 million less, okay? So it means, remember, your purchases, as they come through, they also have a credit effect, okay? Because when purchases come through, if it's cash, they affect your cash negatively by credit. If it's accounts payable, you have your accounts payable increasing. So ideally, as those purchases came through, they had an effect on each of the two sides. But for the purchases side, here you undercast, yet already the value on the credit side was recorded by its let's say maybe this was let me use an example of accounts payable. Okay, so when you were recording your transactions, you recognize the right amount for accounts payable. Okay, and I think let me use even an example here. Okay, so we could have purchases of, let's say, let's say, let me use 7 million. So you could have had purchases of 7 million, and this should have been the right figure. But because you undercast it by, let's say, by 3 million, it means here you recorded 4 million. And remember, if these were on credit, and then as you recorded 4 million here you recorded the right figure, okay? Because reason why I'm doing this is every time they give you errors, okay, it's only what they have mentioned that you should take to believe that there is an error that was actually made. What I mean here is that if they say the purchases of the for the period were undercast by this, yours only concentrate on the purchases. The assumption is that it was done right in the alternative account, okay? So that is something that you need to take into the mind, that when they say purchases were undercast by that value, it means that the account they have, that you know that is an alternative account, this transaction, it means that it was it was done rightly in that account. So in this case, if you have purchases of 7 million that were purchased all on credit, and you're transferring them to trial balance, and you know that the accounts payable definitely will have its 7 million. Like I said, every transaction has an effect here and the other has an effect here. So accounts payable has your 7 million, and then your purchases, you undercast them and put 4 million. So ideally, if you have such a scenario, definitely your balance here will be 4 million, and here your balance will be 7 million. Now, it means that you have to introduce a suspense account to make sure that this side actually matches up with this side. So it means that you'll introduce, let's say, a suspense account of 3 million, okay, which was the undercast value. Now your trial balance has actually balanced, okay. Now when you're correcting your errors, remember the suspense account is a temporary account which we should do away with, okay, at any point in time. It should not remain within our accounts. So when we are correcting this, what we shall do is we shall move this 3 million and move it to the purchases account. And that is why we debit our purchases, okay? We definitely debit our purchase so that this amount, now we have realized. The reason why you put a suspense here is because you didn't know where the error was coming from. But since now you have realized that it is actually purchases that were undercast, because ideally you have different items here. So for you to realize where the suspense is actually coming in, you have to do that kind of analysis. So immediately you realize that it's actually purchases that were undercast, you correct the purchases by increasing them. So let's say you've debited your purchases with a 3 million, which we have which we have already done. Now the next thing that you should basically do is do away with the suspense account. Now, like you can see here, the suspense account is on the debit side, okay? And how we can basically do away with it, just like any other account. When you credit an account with the same figure that is on its debit, this account dies away. So if we want to do away with this suspense account that has something on the debit, we shall definitely credit it, okay? We shall definitely credit our suspense account. And that is why you have something like this, where we are debiting our purchases and crediting our suspense account. So the whole reasoning is, the reason why we are debiting our purchases is because we want to do the right thing. We are basically putting the 3 million back to the right account where it should be, so that we don't undercast it again, okay? And that's why we are debiting our purchase, because they have a normal debit balance. So every time they are increasing, now in case there were sales and they told you that sales had been undercast, definitely would have credited our sales, okay? Because sales have a normal credit balance. But in this case, since these are purchases, what we basically do is we debit our purchases. So we have debited our purchases. But then it doesn't end there. Because ideally, if this was a transaction that affected our trial balance from balancing, it means that we have something called a suspense account. And this suspense account is a temporary account that we also need to deal away with at this point in time. So that is why, since the effect of the suspense account on this transaction was on the debit side, it means that if we want to do away with this, we credit with the same amount, so that they just balance all through and that suspense account will be gone. So that is ideally why when I come to answering my question here, I'll debit my purchases and credit my my suspense. That is basically the background accounting of why we actually credit your suspense. So it's not something that you should really just cram, but you need to understand the dynamics, okay? Understand that whatever you're doing here with the CEO suspense is basically an effect, okay? You're trying to do an alternative effect on this suspense account to do away with it, because ideally, after I've recorded it here, what I'll basically do is I'll come to my suspense account, okay? Since this is 150, what I'll come to do, since I'm now crediting my suspense account, I'll come and write here, I will say purchases, and I'll write, since it's 3 million and this is in 1,000, so I'll record 3,000 like that. Now, what this means that at the end of the question, I need to balance off my suspense account. My suspense account needs to be at 0. Ideally, I don't need to have a suspense account going forward because I'm correcting my errors. So anything that brought about errors, I'm correcting it, okay? So that's very important when we are doing that. Let's see how the next transaction appears, maybe to help us to understand even a little more. So they are telling us that extension to the building, we have an extension to the building that cost 65,560,000, was recorded as repairs expense. And they're telling us that the buildings are depreciated at 2% on cost per annum. Now, I've already explained why this building should not, extension should not be recorded under the repairs expense, because it increases the capacity of the building. Therefore, it should be recorded under the buildings account. Now, when you see this transaction in its own, this is an error of principle, okay? And remember what we said about errors of principle? We say that errors of principle don't in any way affect the trial balance, okay? Errors of principle don't in any way affect our trial balance, okay? So ideally, even if we commit such an error, our trial balance will balance. We don't need this so-called suspense account. So having that in mind means that even when we are correcting such an error, we will not have a suspense account appearing in any of our double entry, okay? Because it's an error of principle, okay? Now, given that background, what we are going to basically do, extension to the building that costs that, we are going to do now the right thing. Like I said, how to correct this error is we do the right thing. So since they are telling us that extension to the building that cost 65 million was recorded as repairs expenses, what you basically do is remove it from the repairs expenses, okay? But you know, expenses have a normal debit balance. So it means that this 65 was recorded on the debit side of the repair expenses account. And what else you basically do is you now move it to the right account, which is what? Which is buildings account. So that's the first thing that we are going to basically do. You basically come to your correction of errors here and say, I'm going to, this is part 2. Okay, let me just record it here. So I'm going to debit my buildings account. Buildings account. Okay. And then I'm going to credit my repair expense account. Okay, just use SC like that. So that is what I'll basically do have. So what this would mean is I'll come here, so we pick the amount, how much this was. This is 65 million. So I'll just pick it as it is and record it here. I'll debit the building. Remember, buildings are assets. So every time we have an extension to the building, we debit it. So that's why I'm debiting it. And I also come here and I'll do the same thing. I'll also debit. Okay, I'll debit. I'll credit my repairs expenses. So this has removed. It has reversed out the error we did, like we had made. So it has come to reverse out what we had put in the repairs expenses and then put it into the building. So that is what we have done. And like you've seen, there's no suspense account coming in. Now, why the examiner goes ahead to give you this, this aspect of saying buildings are depreciated at 2% on cost per annum, this is coming in because ideally, if this value had been recorded in the repairs expenses, it's also much like that it was missed out when we are depreciating our assets, okay? Because when we are depreciating our assets, we go to the, let's say, the buildings account and get the value and then depreciate it. So if it was erroneous recorded in the repairs and expenses account, it means that it was also not depreciated, okay? So what we also have to basically do is we have to depreciate this building that we have now put what? That we have now put under our buildings account. And they have gone ahead to give us the depreciation, which is 2% cost on annum, per annum. So what I'll come basically do, I'm now going to depreciate the asset, okay? So basically you can have a short working, maybe just say depreciation, they're telling you it is 2%. So 2% of the 65. This is 2% of the 65. 560,000. Okay, that is what you basically have, and this is your depreciation. So you have your working there, and then you have your answer coming through right there. Okay, this is about is it about 1 million? It is 1,313,200. Okay, so this one, what you basically do now, since depreciation was not done, we now do what is supposed to be done. Okay, we just, that's how we are going to correct the error. So what we are going to basically do, just even under here, we are going to debit our depreciation account. We are going to debit our depreciation account, and we are going to credit our accumulated depreciation account. Accumulated depreciation account. Now, why I'm doing this is because this is how we recognize depreciation in our books, okay? So the error here is not an error like the error we have seen here of interchange of accounts, okay? The error here is just to recognize what was not recognized, okay? And this is how I recognize. And you see, when you're doing your journal should have both a credit and a debit entry, okay? So that is what I'm basically doing, just from the double entry principles. So I'll debit my depreciation there, and then credit my accumulated depreciation. And that is what I'll basically do. Now, as you can see from all this transaction, there's nothing that I'll come and put in this account, okay? Now, one of the things that you also need to know is that, like you've seen this statement has even actually had two errors to correct. One, it was the misplacement of buildings. The second one was the depreciation of them not depreciating the asset, okay? Now, sometimes, okay, the examiner can also combine also errors in a way that they can, let's say, extension to the building cost, this was recorded in the repairs account as maybe as 60 million, as 560 instead of 65. Now there, you know that you have, let's say, more than one error. You have an error due to the wrong amount, and then you have an error due to the wrong account, okay? So you need to understand the dynamics. And one of the things that I encourage you is that these things, as I'm explaining, they may seem complicated, and you have to really stretch your brain to think about them. But one of the things that I really encourage you is that even me, I struggled with these things. But once I tried out as much as I could try out in terms of numbers, it actually became normal. And when you also understand the double entry principles very well, when you know what to debit and credit, every time somebody comes and tells you about an error, then you can easily figure it out. But the advice I would give is that even after this number, you just try out as many numbers as possible, and you get acquainted with each of them. One of the things that I know with the examiner is that they will always bring similar questions, okay? Just like the way we are seeing extension of the building here, the examiner will just tweak this a little more. I'll just show you something small. So this is another paper, okay? This is a totally another paper. And you see what he brings as the first thing. He says repairs of machinery, shillings 4.5 had been charged to the machinery account. You see, he has just twisted something small. What he has done in the other transaction, when it came to here, it was the other way around. The extension of the building was put in the repairs expense account. Now, to this other question that he has brought right here, it says repairs were actually charged to the machinery account. But the principle is the same, because yours is to know that repairs should definitely be in the repairs account. They should not go to the machinery account, okay? because this is like a revenue expenditure. It should go to the only thing that would come to the machinery account in case we are maybe buying a new machinery, okay? And that is what would be there. So it's the same principle. And in the same way, what we shall basically do is we shall remove the 4.5 from what? From where it's not supposed to be. We shall remove it from the machinery account by crediting our machinery account, and we shall debit our preparers of machinery. And that's how we shall correct it. This is also an error of principle, okay? So that is what I'm saying, is that the examiner will just keep on changing out things. Just like the way you see here, he comes and says, sales journal was undercast by, let's say, 6.5 million. The other side you've seen he has spoken about purchases, but let's say in a totally different way. The same thing also here. This is also an example of error of principle, by the way. He comes and says that purchase of a motor vehicle 15 million was entered into the purchases account, okay? This is also an error of principle. Why this is also an error of principle is because the purchases account only records goods that are bought for resale or goods that are bought to be used, to be transformed into final products to be sold, okay? So if we are buying a motor vehicle is not a purchase. It's not basically recorded under our purchase because it's not a raw material to our final products, and it's not one for resale, okay? And that's why you see when you're looking at even errors, you also need to go back and understand what is this business all about? Because if it was a business that is dealing in vehicles, like a bond, okay, a purchase of motor vehicle definitely go to the purchases account because that is what they deal in, okay? That's what they resell. But a case in point here, where these guys don't deal in vehicles, definitely this would not really have to appear under the purchases account. So that is an error of principle as well, okay? So I just wanted to encourage you from that perspective before I can proceed. So the more you do these questions, the more it actually becomes much easier because the examiner will just change a few things and will just bring the same thing, and you can basically get overall marks on this question. So we proceed. So they come here and they tell us that a cash receipt, which is one of those source documents from a debtor, a cash receipt from a debtor was credited to the cash book as 50,000. Okay, I think you can see. And then you're telling us that and debited to the debtor's account, to the debtor's account as 5 million. I think you can see here, this is real, these are real errors, okay? A cash receipt of 500,000 from a debtor was credited to the cash book as shillings 50,000 and debited to the debtor's account as shillings 5 million. Now let's see just something very small here. And one of the steps you have to first do is first understand the error that was actually made before you can even think about the double entry to correct it. So a cash receipt, how was it supposed to be recorded? A cash receipt is supposed to be debited to the cash book, okay? It's supposed to be debited to the cash book by how much? By 500,000. But you see what these guys did? They credited it to the cash book. Was it supposed to be credited to the cash book? No. This same cash receipt from a debtor, for us to complete the double entry after we have debited our cash book, this transaction should be credited to our debtor's account. But you see what these guys did? They debited the debtor's account with 5 million. Now I want to give you an easy trick to handle these questions. Now yours is for you, even before you think about now, of course, this ideally has a suspense account coming in, because ideally they interchange the accounts but recorded them on different values. So ideally the effect on the debit side is different from what is on the credit side, okay? So it has a suspense involved. But even before you think about what to do with suspense, first correct what you understand. So what I'm going to basically do is a cash receipt of 500,000 from a debtor was credited to the cash book as 50,000. So what I'm first going to do is I'm first going to correct what was done, okay? So I'm going to remove this 50,000 from the credit side of the cash book because it's not supposed to be part of on the credit side of the cash book, but rather it should be what? It should be on the debit side. So I'm going to remove it from the credit side and put it in the right side, okay? So what I'm going to basically do is I'll come to my journal here. So this is error number 3 that I'm correcting. So they are telling us that this was credited to the cash book, okay, as 50,000. So what I'm going to basically do, I'm going to get my cash, the cash account, okay? I'll get my cash account, and the first thing that I want to basically do is I want to first debit. What I'm going to basically do, I want to first remove what was wrongly placed there, okay? So I'm removing this 50,000 that was pressed on the wrong side, that was credited. So I'm going to debit it. So I'm first going to debit my cash account with 50,000, okay? And I want you to watch something here. So that's the first thing that I'm doing. Now, as I do debit it with the 50,000, the 50,000 is to basically correct the credit that was put. So I just put the 50,000 on debit side, and it matches, it cancels each other, okay? So ideally, once I have done this, it's like there is no transaction in the cash book now, because what is on the credit side, I've reconciled it by posting something on the debit side. Now, after I have done that, I'm now going to post the right thing, okay? Now, the right thing for me, a cash receipt of 500,000 was supposed to be done what? Was supposed to be debited to my cash book. So I'll just come in the same way to my journal here, and I'll still include my cash account. I want you to watch here critically and record the 500,000. Why I've recorded now the 500,000 is because now I'm recognizing the actual transaction in the right way, because this is a receipt from a debtor. So that is one of the things that I'm doing. Now, that is cash. And once I do these two things, ideally my cash account is now okay. Okay. I've been able to remove the 50,000 that was wrongly put on the credit side by putting something that on the debit side that cancels the 50,000. And I have put the 500,000 on the debit side to recognize the receipt. Okay. That's the first thing that I have done. And I'll first keep it at that. The next thing that I will do, I'll come and see how the debtors work. Okay. So they are telling me that the debtors, they debited to the debtors account by how much? By 5 million. Okay. So what this means is that this is not supposed to be like this. I'm not supposed to debit my debtors account when debtors are paying me. I should be able to credit my debtors. So since they debited my debtors account with 5 million, what I'm going to basically do is I'm going to remove the 5 million that is on the debit side of my debtors. And what I'm going to remove it is I'm going to credit now my debtors account by 5 million. And when I credit my debtors account with the 5 million will be able to cancel each other, okay? And it will correct the error that was actually made. So I'll just come here for my debtors account, What I'll basically do, since they debited with 5 million, I'll come and credit with how much? With 5 million. So this 5 million is just to cancel out what they put on the wrong side, okay? What they put on the debit side. That is the only thing that is here to cancel. Now, the next thing is for me is actually to do the right thing, okay? Now, the right thing for this transaction, I was supposed to credit my debtors with how much? With 500,000. That is what I was supposed to basically do, okay? So when I come back to this statement, mine is to look at C. So the cash, I've been able to correct the cash now. At least I have the 500,000 on the debit side of my cash, and I've canceled out the 50,000. The same thing I've also done when it comes to my debtors. I've been able to cancel the 5 million by crediting my debtors account. And the next thing that I did was to actually credit my debtors account with the 500,000, which now makes it the right thing, okay? So ideally, I have been able to do the right thing for the two accounts, but mine is to come back and see. Remember, this is a journal, and this journal should be able to balance out. So I have put something on the debit side here, which is 550, and I've put something on the credit side here, which is 5.5. Now, ideally, this side is not balancing with this side, okay? Because here I have 550 and here I have 5.5. Now, for me to balance off these two sides, I have to introduce a suspense account. Like I said, the transaction, by how we did it, it affects the trial balance, and therefore there is a suspense account. Now, if I'm comfortable that I've done the right thing for the cash account and I've done the right thing as well as for the debtors account, the difference between this side and this side would bring in would be the amount that I'll post to my suspense account. So let's just try to see. This is 550, and this is 5.5. Okay. So ideally, my suspense account will be the difference, which is 5.5. 5.5 minus 550, which is 4950. So when I add now these two, this is 5.5 and this side is also 5.5. So this alone has now corrected my error, and this is how I would actually leave it as it is. Okay, this is how I would leave it. So ideally, so what I'll definitely do with that, after I've gotten my 950, I'll just move to my suspense account here and be able suspense account up and be able to now record that kind of transaction. Okay, and what I'll basically do, of course, it was to do with the data. So, and what we have debited our debtors. So I'll just come, let's say my debtors. Okay, this is let me just pick it. It's 4950. So I'll just record 4950 because there's already 3 zeros up. Now I want to explain something small here, and I think you might be wondering why I've taken that direction. That is the easiest way to deal with suspense. You don't have to think so much and say, what do I do about with suspense? And that's why I'm saying that the way to approach this is first do what you understand. Okay, first do what you understand, and after you've done what you understand, is you know that the alternative account will be suspense. Okay, that will help you balance the two sides, just like the way I did here. I said my purchases were undercut by 3 million. I knew that this transaction affects my trial balance. So what I did the right thing. The right thing was to debit my purchases. So the next question is, what next? My journal has to balance. If this transaction affects my trial balance, then the alternative account will be suspense, and I'll put it there. So like that, that's the same principle I've done here. I've made sure I've done the right thing for the cash as well as for the debtors. And that is why you see sometimes you may find another person, they will just add up this 550, okay? And have, let's say, have, what they will do, they have 550 here, and they will not have this line, okay? So their cash account has the 550, and then for the debtors, they will just include this to be 5.5, and it will be like that, okay? So that is what will basically be. So they will have just a single account with the total, and then also a single account with the total, and this is how it will appear. Now, for me, I didn't want to first use this approach because it would confuse you. You'd ask me, why did you get the 550? Why did you get the 5.5? So you can do that aside and then bring it in the summary right here. But I believe that what we had done previously gives you the picture on why this side will be, let's say, 550, and why the other side will definitely be what will be the 5.5. Okay, and then you have there 4950. Okay, so let's proceed and see how the next transaction works. Maybe it will also help us to even learn much more how suspense account work. So they're telling us that Prompt Supplies Limited has had an outstanding balance of 4 million that was paid twice using EFT system. The company refunded the payment. Prompt Supplies had an outstanding balance. Now, Prompt Supplies is like an accounts payable to us. So they had an outstanding balance of 4 million, okay, that was paid twice using EFT. And they're telling us that the company paid back the money. Okay. So you just ask yourself, so what would be the effect of this transaction in itself? Now, one of the things that you need to understand here is that if they are telling us that the company refunded the overpayment, okay, because it was paid, had an outstanding that was paid twice and it refunded. Ideally, this would mean that the error was corrected along the way. Basically, by them refunding, it corrected the error that was initially done. Okay, so there is basically no error to be corrected in this transaction. I believe you get it, because we paid them twice and they refunded the amount of money. So here there is no error that needs to be corrected. So you just come here and say for no error to be corrected. Okay, as long as you read the statement and you see that error corrected itself, then there is no error to be corrected. Like that. So the next thing that you need to think about is they're telling us that depreciation of computers 1.3 was entered in the statement of profit and loss as 3.1. The correct amount was entered in the corresponding account. Like I told you, even if they don't make this statement, yours is to make the assumption that the correct amount was actually entered in the right account, just like the way this statement was up here. Okay, even if it was just a single statement, it would be the same thing. Now, if they're telling us that we entered our depreciation in the P&L as 3.1, it means that we basically overstated our depreciation. Rather, it should have been what? It should have been 1.3. And it is one of the reasons why you see what we have here. You see the suspense that is coming in here when you look at your balance sheet or statement of financial position. You're seeing that it was not balancing. And actually, by the way, this suspense account was brought up in the statement of financial position, not even at the trial balance level. Okay, so this should be able to give you a picture. Now, remember, how does the P&L relate to the balance sheet? Remember, when we are recording, when we get a profit or loss from the income statement or the P&L, we come and bring it here under what? Under retained profits. Okay. So ideally, if we have made a mistake in deriving the profits and bring an amount with an error here, ideally our balance sheet will also not balance. Okay, and that means that we'll need, let's say, suspense account to come and first hold the error so that our balance sheet can balance. So in this case, since they are telling us that depreciation of this was entered in the statement of P&L at 3.1, so we have to correct it. Now P&L, which is now coming here under as retained profits. Okay, P&L has a normal credit balance. Okay, P&L have a normal credit balance. Now, if you have depreciation is basically posted on the debit side, is basically debited to the P&L. Okay, depreciation is debited to the P&L. Now, if they are telling us that it was 1.3 that was supposed to be debited, but we rather debited 3.1, it means that we debited more by 3.1. So what we have, okay, we debited more by the difference. So what we have to do is we have to credit our P&L with the difference, so that at the end of the day, we only remain with 1.3 on the debit side of P&L. Okay. Now, I know if you're very fresh to accounting, when I speak of debiting P&L and crediting P&L, it may confuse you. Okay. But every time you see somebody saying that debit your P&L, they're basically saying that put this under the expense account. Okay. A P&L, like I said, ideally would have, those days we used to draw a T account of P&L, and we would put incomes on our credit side and our expenses on the debit side, okay? And ideally would have a balancing figure, let's say, on the credit side. But these days we do basically the vertical format of the P&L, where we have our incomes and then expenses and so on. So you may not easily get the picture of the debit and credit, but the debit and credit also exists there. And that's why I'm saying that expenses are debited to the P&L and incomes are credited to the P&L, because incomes increase your P&L, increase your profit ideally, okay? And then expenses reduce your profit. That's why they are debited. So if they are telling us that depreciation worth, let's say 1.3 was actually recorded at 3.1, it means that we debited with a higher figure, okay? So we have to reduce by the difference so that we maintain it back to 1.3, okay? So let's just try to get the difference between 1.3 and 3.1. So let's just, if we have 3.1 right here, and then 1.3. Now this is an error of transposition. Okay, you've transposed 3 for 1. So what the difference here is 1.8. Okay, so what I'm going to do when I'm correcting this error, part number 5, what I'm going to basically do, like I said, it was a debit. The 3.1 was posted as a debit, okay, in the P&L, and we have to reduce it back to 1.3. So what I'm going to basically do, I'm going to credit my P&L, okay? So I'll credit my P&L with how much? With the 1.8. And why I'm crediting it with 1.8 is I want to reduce the 3.1 that is on the debit side, okay? So that it is able to balance off each other. And then one of the things that I'll debit is my suspense with 1.8. Somebody will ask and say, why are we not crediting depreciation? Now, I want to bring it to your attention here. Remember, we have left the ledgers already. We left the ledgers, we went to the trial balance, and now we're at the P&L stage, okay? And remember, the error was not made in the depreciation account. It was made in the statement of P&L. So we are making the adjustment within the P&L, so that at the end of the day, we are able to adjust what? Adjust our retained profits, okay? So we are not adjusting our depreciation here, but rather we're adjusting our P&L where we took a wrong figure. So that's why I'm not bringing a depreciation account in this transaction. Our depreciation account was okay. It's just that when we're entering the statement of P&L, we entered the wrong figure, okay? So that is what you need to basically know. In the same way, of course, one of the things that we said with the L of transposition, if you remember very well, I'll bring you to your attention here. L of transposition, we say that it affects the trial balance. And we say that all errors that are affected by trial balance are corrected by a suspense account. That is why I didn't hesitate after I found out that I need to credit my P&L with 1.8. Definitely the alternative account that came in my mind is the suspense account. And even when you get it back to what I was demonstrating here, you actually come to realize that by us making such an error, it actually affected our suspense account this way. So we need to correct it by debiting it. So I'll just come to my suspense account here. Since I'm now debiting, this is P&L, I'll just come and say P&L and put the 1,800, okay, which is the 1.8. That is what I'll basically do. So I'll move to the next transaction. I'll move to the next transaction, which tells me that a check of 5.6 received from a debtor was debited to. A check of 5.6 received from a debtor was debited to the bank account and credited to the sales account. a check from a debtor was debited to the bank account and credited to the sales account. Now I want to give you a chance to reflect on this, and then you give me the answer. And I want to get like 2 responses from you on how you'd correct this this error. So just think about it and just type in the chat box for us to know what exactly to do. Then I'll explain to you on what you need to do. So just get 2 people. So do I have some answers? I think that is hard. Somebody says there's reversal work on number 5. Reversal. Depreciation of computers 1.3 was entered in the statement of P&L as 3.1. Here we don't reverse out. We basically wouldn't reverse out. Like I said, one of the things that we do every time you post something of, let's say, low, what you can basically just do, like the one I've given you, just post something on the credit side so that it does what? It does gives you a net effect. But just in case you wanted to take that approach of reversal, okay? Let me just give you an insight here, and maybe this will also help other people as well, even before I proceed. So this is what is going to happen. If you wanted to pass through the aspect of reversal, so yes, reverse out the 3.3, the 3.1, because we debited it because this was an expense, so we debited it. So what you basically do is you're saying that you reverse out. Let's say you reverse out with 3.1. So that is what you basically do, and you do the right thing. Now the right thing is what? Is debiting this by 1.8, because 1.8 was the right amount. No, 1.3, sorry. 1.3 was the right amount. So what this would mean is that you have put something on the credit side of 3.1 and you put something on the debit side of 1.3. The net effect here is basically the difference of 1.8 on what? On the credit side. So that is why you would put it. You'll just have a 1.8 on the credit side, and you don't have this. But it's the same net effect, by the way. Okay, it's the same net effect that you basically have. But why? Of course, if you are at a P&L, you're not going to revert. You're not going to. You don't want to re-prepare your what? To re-prepare your P&L. You just want to adjust the last figure, which is the profit. Okay, so that is why we only just look at the net effect and bring it here. But it's the same principle. Okay, so I want us to see what people are saying here on our transaction. Okay. I think I'd gone away from the transaction. So this is a transaction. They're telling us that a check of 5.6 received from a debtor was debited to the bank account, which is the right thing, and credited to the sales account. So let me see what people indicate. Okay, so Daniel says, I think we shall debit sales to correct the error and credit the debtor's account. Okay. And then 2 accounts will be affected. Sales will be debited by 5.6, and we shall credit our bank account. Shall credit our bank account when we are receiving money. And then saying, I think this error was error of principle. Debit sales account, credit debtor's account. Now let's see. A check of 5.6 received from a debtor was debited to the bank account, which is right, because when we receive a check, From a data, it should be debited to our bank account. That one is totally right. And now the next thing they're telling us that it was credited to the sales account. Now ask yourself, by the time somebody is the data in your books, have you recognized the sale already? Okay. Remember, let's just try to look at the accounting of the data. Okay, how data's come into place. Now, data's come into place when we sell items on credit. Okay, data's come into place when we sell items on credit. And every time we sell items on credit, what will basically happen is we shall debit our debtors account. We shall debit our debtors account, and we shall credit our sales account. We shall debit our debtors account and credit the sales account. And this is at the point of sale. Okay. Now, at the point of payment, what we do here, if they are paying us through bank, we shall debit our bank. Okay. And we shall credit our debtors account. Now, at the point of payment, we don't bring in sales again because we already recognize them at the point of sale. Okay, we only bring in what? We only bring in the debtors so that we adjust the amount we put here. Okay, just in case that this data maybe had 50,000, maybe if this was a transaction, 50,000, it means that at the point of payment, we are going to debit our bank if they are paying 50,000 with 50,000, and we shall credit our debtors account with 50,000. Now, the 50,000 is to remove this amount from your debtors account that you had debited earlier on. Okay, so the transaction that they have given us, one we are correcting an error on here, means that if they are telling us that a check of this received from a debtor was debited to the bank account, okay, as 5.6, this was done rightly. Okay, but crediting it to the sales account was wrong because the sales account had been debited already, has been credited already at the point of sale before we can even reach the point of receiving money. So what I'll basically do is I'll remove this transaction from the sales account by doing what? By debiting my sales account, and I'll credit my debtors account. So it's an L of principal, just like the way I think Betty has passed that. And then to account, sales account will be debited, and you credit the bank account. Josephine will not credit the bank account because the bank account is already right. Daniel, we debit the sales account, correct the error, and then credit the debtors account. Yes, this is right. So that is the kind of approach we take. Okay, so as you can see, it is getting a little much easier for us to know. So I'll have item 6. What we are saying is we shall debit our sales account, and then we shall have our debtors account that shall be credited. Now, this transaction does not have a suspense account in it, and I'm glad I didn't get anyone who say that we should have a suspense account, because this is an error of principle, and errors of principle basically don't affect the trial balance. Okay, and that's why we didn't have anything coming up from that perspective. So okay, this is let me just try. This is 5, 6, those zeros right there. Okay, this is 5.6, remove 1 0. Okay, so that is what I'll have. So that's how we shall correct our error, and I will not post anything in my suspense account. There's nothing really that goes there. So I'll move to the next one, which is number 7. Transaction number 7, we shall get to. So they're telling me that something here. They're telling me that no entry had been made in the company's books for bank charges, shilling 67. I already commented on this and said this was an error of what? This is an error of omission. Okay. So it means that I'm going to recognize the bank charges. I'm going to recognize the bank charges. So I'll just come to my books of accounts and say what? 7, debit bank charges. Remember, bank charges are expenses, and when expenses are increased, they are debited. and I'll credit my bank account, okay? Because my bank will reduce. So what this would mean is I'll just pick the amount, which is 67,000. In the same way, errors of omission don't affect, your trial balance. Errors of omission don't affect your trial balance. Remember what we said? Error of omission does not affect, and it's not corrected by suspense account. So I don't expect to see somebody mentioning a suspense account at that level, okay? So that should come in as much easier. Somebody says, Coach, for error number 6, why are you not having any transaction in the bank account yet there is a check payment being made? Let me go back to the transaction, Josephine, so that we can agree together. They're telling us that a check of 5.6 received from a debtor was debited in the bank account. Now, when we are correcting errors, we only correct the errors that were made. We don't touch what was done right. So if this is a transaction for item 6, this check of 5.6, yes, it was received from a debtor and it definitely affects our bank account. But if the accountant did debited it to the bank account, then we don't again have to affect our bank account. Because, for example, if we did what you are proposing, if we went ahead and credited our bank account, okay, in this way, we'll be matching it off. We'll just have, which will be canceling each other. The 5.6 on the debit side will just cancel with the 5.6 on the credit side, and there will be nothing totally in our bank account to reflect such a transaction. So that is why I'm saying that every time you're correcting errors, only correct what was not done right. Okay, so that is why when we read this statement, yes, we are comfortable. We only came to what was done wrongly. This crediting the sales account was wrong. So we removed it from the sales account and put it to the debtor's account, and our double entry was finished. So it doesn't mean you're not recording this transaction in the normal, just like the way you have a journal transaction, and then you're debiting and crediting. Here is not this is not the principle. The principle here is to correct the error. That is what exactly we basically do. So I hope that is helpful. So this we have recorded. Let's just try out this and see. So they're telling us that share capital of 405.4 was brought forward in error as 450.4. This is like an error of transposition. Okay. Now what we have to do, remember, share capital has a normal what? Share capital has a normal credit balance. Share capital is equity, and every equity item has a normal credit balance. So if they are telling us that share capital of 405.4 million was brought forward in error as 540 this, what we are basically going to do is, remember, they brought forward by a higher figure, okay? So ideally, we have a higher figure on the credit side of our trial balance compared to the 405 that should actually be on the credit side. We have a higher figure. So ideally, for us to correct this error, we have to get the difference between this to see what value or by what amount is our credit side higher, okay? By what amount is our credit side higher? Because the share capital has a normal credit balance, and that means it has a credit effect on our trial balance, okay? And that means that if it has a credit effect on our trial balance, it means that if at all we overcast it, it means our trial balance will have a higher credit value than what it should actually have. So for us to correct it, we have to debit our share capital by the difference. And the reason why we will debit our share capital by the difference is to net off the effect of the higher value, okay? So that is one of the things that we are going to basically do. So share capital, since we put a higher figure there, we are going to debit it. We are going to debit our share capital, okay? And then since it's an error of transposition, it has a suspense in it, okay? It has a suspense account in it. So the difference, let's just get the figures here. You can press your calculator. Make sure you have a good calculator for now, because the exam is just on the way, and you need to make sure that you're not just going to practice using the calculator. Let's say when you get to the exam, okay, you'll be able to, you'd have used this calculator for some time. Some students only carry calculators to the exam without practicing with those calculators, and they get challenges of knowing which figures to press there. Okay. Okay. This is just okay. So those are the figures we have. Let me just get the difference. Was it 405 million? Yes. Okay. So let me just get the difference between those two figures. This minus this gets me to 45 million. Okay. So it means that I basically I brought forward a higher amount by 45 million on the credit side of my share capital, and that affected my trial balance as well. So that's why I'll debit my share capital with 45 million. This is 45 million. And I'll credit my suspense with 45 million. Okay, that is what I'll basically do. Now, somebody would ask me, why didn't we use the reversal here as well? Okay, in the same way, if you wanted to use the reversal, okay, this is what would happen. I'm just going to show you how this will exactly happen. And you do this from your work. So this is share capital, okay? So our reversal, remember we recorded 450. So since share capital is recorded by credit, you debit reverse out any amount. So you debit by 450 to just cancel the amount. And the next thing that you definitely have to do is now post the right thing, which is the share capital, okay? Which is the share capital. So you're seeing that you're going to debit to correct what you have, to correct what you did, and then you're going to post this amount, which is the right value that should be there. The next thing that you do is you look at this side, and this side is not balancing, and this side is not balancing because of what? Because of the difference. And you bring in your suspense account right here, the suspense account right there, to cover up the difference, which is 45, because this side is 450 million, and this other side is 405. So you have your 45 million. So this is what you have. But you don't, in case you don't have to have, let's say, two accounts like this. If at all this value was on this side, just add them together and have a single account. If at all this value is on the opposite side, get the difference, and the side that has a higher figure should be the one to remain with the figure. Now, like for example here, you just get the difference between 450 and 405. The side which has the higher figure is the debit side. So it means that the difference, which is the 45 million, will definitely remain on this other side, okay? So you have your 45 million, this other side, and this is ideally irrelevant now, okay? You just want to put a single kind of effect on your account. So ideally, you still come back to the same thing. So you can use, if this is easier for you, you can first do this on the side and then bring it back here in the journal entry. But the examiner expects you to be able to do this, okay? Yeah, so I'll just come to my suspense account here and write share capital, and it's 45 million, which I'm crediting. So I'll put 45,000 right there. That is what I'll basically put. So the next thing that I'll do is I'll now come to this transaction, where they're telling me that a credit note received from a supplier of shillings 1.1 million had only been posted in the supplier's account. No corresponding entry was made. This is a single entry transaction, okay? Now, a credit note, we said that credit notes are documents received from suppliers to customers to correct what? To correct an overcharge. Okay, if you were overcharged by a supplier, you will ask them to give you a credit note. Now, the rudimentary way of doing things is today you give me an invoice, you overcharge me. Once I realize so, I send back your invoice, you give me another new invoice with the right amount. Now, credit notes and debit notes come to cover that aspect. You don't need to take back the invoice you gave me earlier on. And why it's also not, when you look at from the effect of tax, in most cases, I've even filed this invoice for tax purposes, okay? So how would be able to correct this? Would be able to correct this by issuing what we call a credit note. Now, a credit note has to affect two accounts. Yes, it affects definitely attending a credit note received from a supplier had only been posted in a supplier's account. Now it is posted to the supplier's account. And where would we post in the supplier's account? We post it in the supplier's account on the debit side, because the supplier's account is your accounts payable account. Okay. When you have a credit note, it means that the amount you have to pay to your supplier is way less compared to what you had earlier had. So that's why we debit our supplier's account to reduce how much we should pay the supplier. Now, the next question should be, where is the corresponding double entry? Okay. Now, we have two things. Every time you have, let's say, a credit note, that credit note is coming in because you have what we call return outwards. You have goods that you have returned back to your supplier, okay? Because when you return back goods to your supplier, it means that goods are faulty, so a supplier will give you a credit note, okay? So the corresponding double entry here is we should have posted the 1.1 also in the return outwards account, okay? We should post this value in the return outwards account, in the return outwards account, which some other people may call the purchase returns, okay? The purchase returns. So what I'm going to basically do, since they did the right thing here, I will not touch this, just like the way we did for the bank account up there. I'll only come and post it in the right account, which is the return outwards. Like I said, it should be debited to the supplier's account and credited to the return outwards account. So I'll come here, number 7. Okay, this is number 9. I will come and credit my return outwards. The return outwards account by how much? By what I have there. This is 1.1. So I'll just come here and put my 1.1. Now the next question you ask yourself is, so what is the alternative account after I've done this? Definitely it is suspense. Why suspense? Then I'll take you back to what we said. Errors of single entry affect the trial balance and therefore are corrected by suspense. Remember, if they're telling you that they only posted in one account, because the transaction is telling you that they only posted in the supplier's account, no corresponding entry was made, it means this is an error of single entry. So ideally, you'd have to put the entry and then the corresponding double entry would go to the suspense account. So that is why I came and did the same thing. So suspense account gives me 1.1. So I'll come to up here. Since I'm crediting my suspense, I'll put my returns outward 1.1. Like I said, practice these things. They will become much easier for you, okay? 1.1 is that, 1.1, okay? Yeah. Then the next thing they give me, they told me that the loss for their end period is that that is not okay. It's basically it's not an error. It's just a declaration for you. So after you have done that, we have finished all our errors. So what you need to basically do is come and now check on your what? You come and check on your suspense and add the two respective sides. Okay. Add this side and then this side. Let's just make sure that we recorded everything in the suspense. So the balance brought down, we recorded it. Then we had something in the debtors here, which was 4950, which we recorded there. Then we had something else. We had a 1.8, which was supposed to be debited, which we also recorded there. Then we had that one did affect. We had a share capital of 45, which we recorded there. Then we had this one, item 9, which we also recorded there. The 1.1. Where are the purchases that we recorded? The purchases. Okay, we have purchases here of 3 million, which we also recorded there. Is that all that we included within our account? Let me just try to see something small here. Okay, let's just correct this. Let me just take you back to this transaction. They're telling us that, let's just try to read it again, because I just realized we've done something that shouldn't be done. So they're saying us a credit note received from a supplier of 1.1 had been posted in the supplier's account. Now, like I said, in the supplier's account, this 1.1 should be done what? We should debit it in the supplier's account. And one of the reasons why we debit it in the supplier's account is because the supplier's balance is reducing, okay? Because there is a credit note, the amount he demands us is now less. So we should debit it here. So once we come here to our account here, we should actually make sure that we credit our returns outwards, not debit it, okay? Because the debit portion should go to the supplier's account, and then a corresponding entry should definitely come to the suspense. So I think we had altered this information. We had made an error again, okay? So let's just correct this, put this here, the return outwards, and see how our account looks like, okay? So let's add up this side. When you add up, this gives you 48K, gives you 48K. And then when you add up here, let's just add up and see. This also gives you 48,000, okay? So what this means, what this 48,000 means, balancing off here, it means that you've done away with your what? You've been able to do away with your suspense account, because this is the ultimate end result of correction of errors, is basically to do away with your suspense account, okay? So we've been able to reconcile and come to this position, okay? Of course, you can have your total here. You can have your total of what you posted on the, okay, I think I altered. It's not a column I should have posted. Okay, it's up to here. I think I've gone very far. I've gone very far. So it should just end here. So your journal should have this total, should be able to balance as well, just like the way we have what? How a trial balance would basically look like, okay? So you should have those totals, 128 and 128. So this is the effect that has been made on the debit and the credit side, okay? So from the question here, remember the examiner asked you to journalize, which we have done, and then they will ask you to prepare a suspense account, which we have done. Now, the last part of this question asked us to prepare a corrected statement of financial position, okay? Now, what you basically do with these 8 marks, yours is to come here. You see this that they have given you? This is what they gave you at the start, okay? And then you've corrected your errors. Now, yours is to come back and correct each of these items. If there is any error here that affected each of the items here, then you should actually come back and correct it as you redraw your trial balance, okay? Your not your trial balance, but your statement of financial position. Ideally, this suspense account will no longer appear in your balance sheet, okay? It will not appear. Now, I'll give you an example. Of course, I'll definitely do my assets, and I'll start with my non-current assets. So I'll have my plant and machinery, plant and equipment. Mine is to ask myself, did I have any error that affected plant and equipment? If I don't have any error that affected my plant and equipment, I'll definitely transfer this figure as it is there, okay? Because ideally, I didn't have anything that affected my plant and equipment if I'm to forget. And how I would best also understand is I'll just come to the accounts here and see if is there where my plant and machinery was affected. There is nowhere. So I'll be able to record that amount as it is, okay? I'll record that amount as it is. The next thing, I'll come to my buildings. My buildings, were these affected? Yes. Remember, we had an error that increased our buildings by a given figure. Remember where we debited our buildings? So I'll increase my buildings by this value, but also come and depreciate it by the 1.3112, so that the net effect is able to give me the right figure for my buildings, okay? So my buildings will be affected because from the error correction, my buildings are affected. I'll come to my cash and bank. The question will be, is my cash and bank still the same? No, because I have different items that have affected my cash and bank along the way. The first one that affected it was this one, where we had a 550 that was being debited on the cash account. So this increases my cash and bank account by 550. And then I'll come down to see if there's any other item. There is no any other item. So I'll just adjust my cash by 550, okay? So when you're recording your cash, let's say your current assets, this balance sheet that the examiner gave you is mixed up. That's why you have cash and bank here, and then you have land, then you have, so it's mixed up. But for yours to do it systematically, you have your non-current assets, and then you have your current assets separately. So when you're under your current assets, you just have to come and adjust this figure by 550, like add 550 onto it, because the error that you were correcting here had a 550 onto it, which was being debited. So that's what you basically do, or for each of the items. When I come to land didn't have any error that I needed to correct, so land will remain. So when I'm recording my non-current assets, I'll record land as it is. Trade receivables, was it affected? Yes, I have something that affected my debtors, and how I'll find out with that is I'll come to my journals here. I had an item here, so I had 5.5 added to my as a credit to my debtors in correcting my my errors. So I need to go and adjust my trade receivables by removing 5.5 because I have a credit here in my errors. Then I also have something here. I also have another credit of 5.6. So I'll again adjust it with 5.6, reduce it by 5.6. Okay. So at the end of the day, the debtors that I'll have, the trade receivables that I'll remain with will be the 95 less the 5.5 less the 5.6, because each of the errors that I was correcting, I was crediting them. So that's what I'll have. The next thing, suspense account, this will no longer appear. Okay. Share capital, how will it be affected? We had something with share capital. Remember, they told us that share capital should be what? Should be was brought forward as 450, but should actually be this. So it means that your new share capital value under your equity should actually be the right figure, to be 405. Okay. So you just come and correct it accordingly there. Then 10% loan, this one didn't have any effect. Expenses payable, I didn't see any effect here. Share premium was not affected. Retained profits are definitely affected, okay? Remember what we did when we were trying to affect our P&L? So this will affect your retained profits. Of course, it will be an increment, but also wherever you see anything to do with an expense and an income, it will affect it, okay? Remember, your purchases affect your profits. Repairs also affect your profits. So everywhere where you basically have to do what we call a corrected profit balance, okay? So each of these items would affect your profit. So you have to go ahead to look at that. Then finally, your trade payables, you also check out and see, are they affected by each of any of these items? Did I have anything on trade payables? I definitely don't have anything. So my trade payables, I'll record them the same way, okay? And I'm making this assumption that all of you understand how basically a statement of financial position looks like, okay? So you just basically use that idea to be able to create your statement of financial position and be able to earn the 8 marks, okay? Why don't I give you this as an assignment? Since time has gone, why don't you do this on your own and share your solutions on the WhatsApp group? So just draw the statement of corrected statement of financial position and take a picture of your answer of your book and put it on the chat box. You may not do it right now. If you have time, you can do it right now, but let's make sure that at least by close of tomorrow, by at least around, let's say around 9, every one of us should have an answer posted on the WhatsApp group. I know we're about 14 here and we're about 16 at one point in time. Let's have at least each of us post their response on the WhatsApp group with their calculation. And one of the things that I will tell you, and I'll keep emphasizing, that accounting is about practice. We can come here, sing, and things look like easy, but get down by yourself, try out something, and you'll actually realize, okay, that things need your own intervention, your own practice. After you have done that, I would also love, by all means, to see you try out this question as well. Try out this question. And one of the things that I would also tell you is that even before you post your answer, okay, check yourself and see, has your suspense account been able to balance, okay? And have you been able to post the right journal entries? If you guys can try out this question, us together, just like the one I'm saying, try it out, post your answer, and see even how other people have approached it, okay? Ideally, your suspense account should be able to help you gauge if you've passed, if you've not passed. And if you have any issue on each of these transactions, please, you'll be able to post it on the WhatsApp group, and then I'll be able to respond accordingly. At least when you try out this, I'll be comfortable that at least this session has not gone maybe irrelevant. You've been able to learn something. So do for me the corrected statement of financial position, and also make sure that you also do you try out that other question that I showed you. If we can do that, then we'll be somewhere along our journey in passing such a question, if it at all it comes. So I look forward to your active participation, and I've given you a timeline of up to tomorrow. At least by 9, we should have this. So utilize the time and put something there. Like I said, practice what will get you ahead. Most people would have gotten better marks in the last exam, some of my students, but because I emphasized practice and they didn't do it, they came out and told me, I only did 2 questions. I didn't have enough time. And why you didn't have enough time is you've never practiced. You've never put yourself into an examination environment of practicing being able to do these questions over and over time, okay? Remember, when you practice, you increase your speed and you're able to get acquainted with some of these questions. They become usual to you, okay, at the end of the day. So I want to appreciate you for being part of this session. And I look forward to seeing your responses on the WhatsApp group. And also, in case you have any challenges on each of these that we have done, or this other question that you're going to look at, then I would also want you to post it there, and let me also see members deliberate on what they think, just like the way we had that deliberation on that transaction that was just posted on the WhatsApp group. So thank you so much. And somebody tells me post the question on, okay, I'm going to post the two papers, by the way, on the WhatsApp group. But so you know, this paper is May 2019. Okay, this is May 2019. And the other question that we were trying to do, this other question, let me see. This was, you just note it down. This is 15th March 2021. Some of you have these questions already with you, so it's much easier for you. But I'll take a deliberate move to share these as well with you there. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best. Bye-bye.